Have you ever stopped to think about what family really means? Not the Disney movie version, not the fairy tale we grow up hearing, but the raw, sometimes brutal reality of being treated as invisible by the very people who are supposed to love you unconditionally. I spent 28 years of my life believing that family was sacred, that blood was more important than anything, that I had an obligation to endure humiliation, disrespect, and exclusion because, after all, they're your relatives. Until the day I got a message that changed everything, a message uninviting me from the family Thanksgiving. And you know what my reaction was? I didn't cry. I didn't beg. I smiled, because they had no idea what a gift they had just given me. Look, I know what you're thinking. Another family revenge story. Totally cliché. But wait, because what I'm about to tell you has nothing to do with explosive drama or social media exposure. There's no public scandal, no nasty fight, no one getting humiliated. In fact, it's something much more powerful. There's silence. There's choice. There's a woman who built a $6.2 million life while her family thought she was a failure. And when they finally found out the truth, when they saw the photo of that table with 32 people celebrating what really matters, it was already too late. Because revenge, the real kind, isn't loud. It's absolutely silent and devastatingly effective. Here's the truth no one tells you. You don't need to forgive the people who hurt you. You don't need to keep toxic people in your life just because you share DNA. And you definitely don't need the approval of those who rejected you to validate your success. I know. That goes against everything society teaches. But they're your family. Blood is thicker than water. You'll regret it. Lies. All well-intentioned lies that keep people trapped in cycles of emotional abuse for generations. And I'm going to prove it to you in the next few minutes. I'll show you how I cut off my blood family, built a chosen one, and never, not for a single second, regretted it. Because the best revenge isn't making someone else suffer. It's living so well that their absence becomes an irrelevant detail. So if you're tired of being the black sheep, if you're exhausted from trying to be good enough for people who will never value you, if you want to learn how to turn rejection into fuel, pain into power, and exclusion into freedom, stay with me until the end. Because this story isn't just mine. It belongs to everyone who's ever felt small at a table that was supposed to be about love. And the twist will blow your mind. Because when my family found out who I really was, when they saw the life I'd built without them, their reaction was, well, you'll have to watch to find out. I'll just give you one hint. Indifference hurts a lot more than anger, and I mastered the art of powerful indifference. You know that feeling of never being good enough? Of walking into a room and sensing everyone measuring you, weighing your worth like they're inspecting a defective product? Yeah, I grew up in that environment. My family had this special talent for turning every gathering into a silent courtroom, where my crime was simply existing differently from them. While my siblings paraded around with fancy college diplomas and imported cars, I was the off-key note in the symphony of perfection they worked so hard to maintain. And look, it's not like I was a failure. Far from it. But in their eyes, my choices were synonymous with mediocrity, almost a personal insult to the family name. I went to a public university. That alone was enough to be a punchline at family gatherings. Oh, she's at the federal university, poor thing. Couldn't get into a good private one, they'd say. As if I wasn't right there. As if my ears couldn't hear the cruelty. My siblings? They were the ones with a future. Colleges that cost more in monthly tuition than my rent, all proudly paid by our parents. Me? I'd been working since I was 16. Waking up early, taking 2 buses, going to class, running back to work. On weekends, while they were at the beach, I was behind a cash register, smiling at customers and saving every penny. The comparisons were constant, almost obsessive. It was like they needed to put me down to validate their own choices. When are you going to get your life together for real? My aunt loved to ask, with that fake smile hiding pure venom. And that word, together, oh, it carried so much meaning. It meant, when are you going to give up this crooked path and follow the script we approve of? When will you stop embarrassing us? I'd swallow hard, force a smile, and change the subject. But inside I recorded every comment, every look of disdain, every little smirk, not out of spite, but because unforgotten pain turns into fuel. Thanksgiving was the perfect stage for this dynamic. Picture a huge table full of beautiful, well-dressed people talking about vacations, investments, promotions. And there I was, always at the end, on the crooked chair near the kitchen. The geography of the table said it all about the family hierarchy. The successful ones sat near the patriarch. Me? I was with the kids and the tagalongs. Those there out of obligation, not merit. My plate was served last. My opinion, when asked for, was received with that, "Oh, she's trying to participate" tone. Was it humiliating? Absolutely. But I went anyway. Every year, religiously, I showed up. Why? That's the question I still ask myself. I think part of me still believed that someday they'd see my worth. That if I behaved, if I endured, if I showed I didn't care about the comments, maybe they'd accept me. But let me tell you something I learned the hard way. People who disrespect you when you have nothing will never respect you when you have everything. Respect isn't earned through humiliation. It's demanded. And me? I hadn't learned to demand it yet. I still thought belonging was worth any price, even my dignity. The worst part wasn't the direct comments, at least those I could counter, even if only in my head. The worst was the indifference disguised as affection. You know when someone hugs you quickly, almost mechanically, and rushes off to hug someone else with real warmth. When they ask, "How are you?" but are already looking at their phone before you finish answering. That silent exclusion hurts more than any insult, because insults you can fight. Indifference you just swallow. And I swallowed it for years. So much that I started believing they were right. That I really was less. That my place was at the end of the table, quiet, grateful just to be there. My sister was the worst. Ironic, right? The person who should have been my ally was my biggest tormentor. She was 2 years older and wore that like a crown. The first to graduate, the first to marry, the first to have everything our parents considered right. And she loved rubbing it in my face. Not obviously, of course. People like her are subtle. A comment here, a comparison there, always in that, "I'm just trying to help you, little sister" tone. But beneath the mask of concern was a clear pleasure in seeing me small. It was almost like my failure validated her success. Like she needed my shadow to shine. And I let her. That's the part that still embarrasses me. I let her because I believed family was sacred. That blood mattered more than anything. That forgiving and forgetting were virtues. How many times did I come home after those dinners feeling small, insignificant, like a walking mistake? How many nights did I cry into my pillow, wondering why I wasn't good enough, why I couldn't be like them? Today, I understand the problem was never me. It was them. But back then, I still thought their love was something I had to earn. And revenge, well, that was still a distant concept, something bad people did. I didn't yet know that there's a silent kind of revenge, powerful and clean, that doesn't dirty your hands but changes fates. The year before the Uninvited, something happened that should have been my breaking point. I had started dating someone special, someone who truly saw me, who valued me. I gathered the courage to ask if I could bring him to Thanksgiving. My sister's answer was quick. "Oh, this year we're keeping it just family, you understand?" I swallowed hard, accepted it, went alone. When I got there, I found out 3 cousins had brought their significant others. 3. Strangers I'd never seen before, sitting at the table, laughing, being proudly introduced. And me? I smiled, greeted everyone, pretended it didn't hurt. But it did. It hurt like a slow stab, one where you feel every inch of the blade going in. That's when something inside me started to crack. Not shatter completely, but crack. You know that moment you realize you're in a one-sided relationship? That you love people who don't love you back? That you work for crumbs of attention, while others feast on affection? I started seeing everything more clearly. The hugs that didn't include me. The photos I was cropped out of. The conversations that went silent when I walked in. Those weren't coincidences. They were intentional. They tolerated me. They didn't want me. And that realization, as painful as it was, would become my freedom. Because you can only start building true revenge when you stop fooling yourself about who was never on your side. And I was about to stop fooling myself. The message came on an ordinary Tuesday. I was in my office reviewing some contracts when my phone buzzed. It was my sister. I opened it expecting something casual, maybe a silly meme or some family gossip. But no, it was a long message, full of hedging, the kind you feel the weight of before you even finish reading. Hey, so this year we decided to have a more intimate Thanksgiving, you know? Just close family. Nothing personal. It's just the house can't fit a lot of people. I read it once, then again, and again. Close family? I wasn't close family. 28 years of being her sister, and suddenly I'd become, what exactly? A distant cousin? An acquaintance? What hurt most wasn't even the message itself. It was the tone. That sugar-coating of poison, you know? Nothing personal. That phrase haunted me all day. What do you mean, nothing personal? Excluding someone from a decades-long family tradition isn't personal? I just sat there holding my phone, feeling that weird delayed sting, like when you take a punch and the pain takes a few seconds to hit. My first reaction was to justify it. Maybe she's right. Maybe it really can't fit everyone. Maybe I'm overreacting. We do that, don't we? Minimize our own pain so we don't have to deal with it. But then came the second part of the message. You understand, right? Don't take it personally. And in that, you understand, there was a clear expectation. She expected me to swallow it quietly. As always. I replied with something generic. That's fine. Enjoy. Short, dry, polite. I wasn't going to give her the satisfaction of seeing me beg for a seat at the table. I put the phone down and tried to get back to work, but my mind was elsewhere. I kept wondering how many people would be at this intimate dinner. 5, 10, 15. The curiosity gnawed at my peace all day. That night at home, I did what anyone would do in the digital age. I stalked my family on Instagram. And that's when the knife really twisted. My cousin had posted a story poll. Who's coming to Thanksgiving this year? Can't wait to see everyone. I clicked. 23 people had responded. Yes, 23. Let me translate that for you. The house that couldn't fit a lot of people was going to host 23 guests, but there wasn't room for me. Close family included cousins I saw once a year, in-laws who barely said hello, even that crazy aunt everyone avoided. But it didn't include the blood sister. I just lay there in bed, scrolling through the names, the little icons confirming attendance. And you know what was the worst? Seeing my sister replying to the comments with heart emojis, thrilled, not an ounce of guilt or discomfort, as if I didn't exist, as if I had never existed. And maybe, in their eyes, I really had never mattered. Then the anger came. I won't lie. A hot, urgent anger rising from my stomach, tightening my chest. I wanted to text her. To expose her lie, post a screenshot of the poll, ask publicly, "So sis, explain how 23 people fit but I don't?" My fingers even started typing. But I stopped. You know why? Because in that moment, something clicked in my head. I realized that if I did that, I'd look desperate, needy, combative. I'd give them exactly what they wanted, to see me begging, belittling myself, proving I was the problem. And I wasn't going to fall for that. Not this time. Because true revenge isn't loud. It's silent. It's calculated. It's cold. So I took a deep breath and did something I'd never done before. I accepted the rejection. I didn't pretend it was okay, didn't try to understand their side, didn't seek reconciliation. I simply accepted it. They didn't want me there? Perfect. I didn't want to be there anymore either. And look, that acceptance didn't come from resignation. It came from something much stronger, clarity. For the first time in nearly 3 decades, I saw those people exactly as they were. Not through the lens of what I wanted them to be, but through what they truly were. And what I saw wasn't pretty. It was ugly, petty, cruel. They'd actually given me a gift, the gift of unvarnished truth. That night I didn't cry. That surprised me. Every time something bad happened with my family, I cried. It was automatic. But this time, nothing. I felt strangely light, like a weight had been lifted off my shoulders that I didn't even know I'd been carrying. I got out of bed, went to my window, and looked outside. The city was alive, full of lights, people coming and going, each with their own stories, their own battles. And I thought, the world is way too big for me to be begging for love from people who don't know how to give it. There are people out there who would give anything to have someone like me in their lives. And here I was, humiliating myself for scraps. It was in that exact moment that the idea started forming. Not clearly yet, but like a seed being planted. If they didn't want to give me a place at their table, I'd build my own table. A table where no one was excluded for not fitting some ridiculous mold. A real table, built from genuine affection, not social obligation. And you know what's funny? The more I thought about it, the more excited I got. It wasn't about proving anything to them. It was about proving something to myself, that I didn't need them, that I never had, that my worth wasn't tied to their approval. And that realization, my friends, is worth more than any loud revenge. In the following days, I didn't tell anyone. Didn't vent to friends, didn't post anything online, didn't send passive-aggressive messages. I stayed silent, and that silence intrigued some people. My mom called me, awkwardly, asking if everything was okay. "Everything's great, Mom," I answered with a lightness that surprised even me. She pressed, "Your sister mentioned the Thanksgiving. You're not upset, right?" I could have opened up right then. Could have put her on the spot, forced her to pick a side. But I didn't. I just said, "No, Mom, it's all fine. I'm doing my own Thanksgiving this year." Silence on the other end. "Oh, okay. Good then." And she hung up, too quickly, like someone who didn't want to get involved. And that's when I knew for sure. None of them were going to defend me. None of them were going to question the exclusion. They'd pretend everything was fine, that it was normal, that I was overreacting if I complained. Family, I realized in that moment, isn't who shares your blood. It's who stands up for you when you're wronged. It's who defends you even when you're not in the room. And looking back, counting on my fingers, I couldn't remember a single time anyone in that family had done that for me. Not once. So why was I still fighting for them? Why was I still trying to belong to a place that clearly didn't want me? The answer was simple and painful, because I was afraid of being alone. But being alone, I was about to discover, is very different from being at peace. There's a secret I've kept from my family for 5 years. A big one. Heavy. The kind that changes the way people see you. And I kept it intentionally. Not out of shame, not out of fear, but because I needed to know one thing. Did they love me for who I was, or for what I had? And well, the answer came with that disinvite message. They never really loved me. So now, sitting in my office, looking out the window of my $6.2 million mansion, I can finally admit the truth. Not to them, but to myself. I won. While they were calling me a failure, I was building an empire, and they had no idea. Let me tell you how it happened. 5 years ago, I was in that respectable corporate job everyone thought was so proper. Average salary, decent benefits, predictable future. Exactly the kind of life my family approved of, as long as I didn't surpass anyone, of course. But I was dying inside. I woke up every day with that gnawing feeling that I was wasting my life, trading precious hours for crumbs. Until one day, without telling a soul, I quit. No plan B, no safety net. Just an idea, an old laptop, and this wild conviction that I could build something from scratch. Something that was mine. I started a digital business. Nothing glamorous at first, trust me. I worked 16-hour days, weekends included, teaching myself everything. Marketing, sales, management, finance. Every cent I made, I reinvested. I lived on instant noodles and coffee. My apartment was tiny, my furniture secondhand, my clothes years old, but I was building. Brick by brick, code by code, client by client. And when my family asked what I was doing with my life, I'd just say, "Oh, I work online." And they'd laugh. Online, they'd scoff, like it was some childish hobby. Perfect. The less they knew, the better. 3 years after quitting, something incredible happened. My business blew up. It wasn't luck. It was brutal work, strategy, resilience. But suddenly, I was making my first million. Me, the poor thing of the family, had just earned in 1 year what my siblings took 10 to save. And you know what I did? Nothing. I didn't tell anyone, didn't post it online, didn't buy a fancy car, didn't even move yet. I kept living exactly the same way, but with one difference. I had power, financial power, the power of choice, the power to change my life completely. And I chose to wait, because I needed to see just how deep their hypocrisy went. The next year I bought my house, paid in full, a stunning mansion, 6 bedrooms, a pool, a huge garden, in one of the most expensive areas of the city. When I signed the contract, sitting in that sleek office, I cried, not from sadness, from relief, from pride, from this overwhelming feeling that I had made it, alone, without their help, without their approval, in spite of them. The realtor hugged me and said, "Congratulations, you deserve it." And she didn't even know me, but she said it with more sincerity than my family ever had. That day, driving back home, I realized revenge doesn't have to be loud. Sometimes it's just you living so well that their silence hurts more than any words. I moved quietly. No housewarming party. No photos online. When someone from the family asked for my address, I gave them the old one and said I was still there. Sounds crazy, right? But there was a method. I kept showing up to family dinners in simple clothes, driving my old car, letting them believe I was still the same failure as before. And you know what was fascinating? Watching how they treated me. Every nasty comment, every pitying look, every joke at my expense. I archived it all. Not out of anger, but with almost scientific curiosity. I was running a social experiment. What happens when people only value you for your status? My business kept growing. I became a mentor, invested in other companies, diversified. My net worth hit 8 figures. 8. I had more money than my entire family combined, and they had no clue. They still saw me as the loser sister who worked on the internet. At family gatherings, when they talked about investments, I stayed quiet, listening to my brother-in-law give basic financial advice like he was Warren Buffett. My portfolio made more in a month than his annual salary. But I smiled, nodded, pretended to learn. It was almost theatrical. And the more I played small, the bigger they felt. Perfect. There was a moment I almost told them. It was at last year's Thanksgiving, the one where they wouldn't let me bring my date. My sister was bragging about her trip to Europe, talking about 5-star hotels and Michelin restaurants. And me? I'd just come back from a month in Southeast Asia, staying in presidential suites. I stayed silent. I thought, I could end this conversation right now. I could pull out my phone, show my photos, my bank statement, my real life, but I didn't. You know why? Because if I had, it would have been about ego, about proving something to them. And the truth was, I didn't need to prove anything anymore. My success was mine. They didn't even deserve to know. That disinvite message, ironically, was freeing. It was like the universe saying, "There, now you can stop pretending." I didn't have to go to those awkward dinners anymore. Didn't have to endure the snide comments. Didn't have to make myself small to fit into the tiny space they offered. They'd unknowingly given me permission to live my real life. And look, I wasn't planning revenge in the traditional sense. I didn't want to destroy them, humiliate them, expose them. That would have been sinking to their level. I wanted something much more powerful. I wanted to live so fully, so authentically, that they'd become background characters in a story where I was the main one, not the stars of my tragedy. So there, in my office, 2 days after that message, I made a decision. I was going to host my own Thanksgiving, but it wouldn't be about me. It would be for everyone who, like me, had been excluded, rejected, underestimated. It would be a celebration of what truly matters: genuine connection, generosity, presence. A table where everyone would be welcome, no matter how much money they had, what they wore, or what they drove. It would be everything my family's table never was. And it would be so beautiful, so full of real love and gratitude, that when they eventually found out, they'd understand exactly what they'd lost. Not out of spite, but because some lessons can only be learned when the door closes. And I was about to close that door, softly, but for good. You're probably wondering, why would anyone hide such a big success? Why keep being seen as a failure when you could be getting applause? The answer is simple, but deep. I needed to know who truly loved me. Not for my bank account, not for my address, not for the car I drove, but for who I was when I had nothing to offer except myself. And let me tell you, this is one of the scariest questions you can ask about the people around you, because the answer can break your heart, but it can also set your soul free. And in my case, it did both at the same time. When I started making real money, my first instinct was to share it. That's human, right? You achieve something big, and you want the people you love to celebrate with you. I even typed messages in the family group chat more than once. Guys, something amazing happened. But I always stopped before hitting send. Something inside me said, wait. Watch first. Because I knew my family. I knew the pattern. When someone got ahead in life, they had two possible reactions. Either they dragged you down with envy disguised as concern, or they latched onto you like a leech. Neither of those was real love. They were just different ways of using you. So I ran an experiment. I kept showing up to gatherings like always, but I paid attention to every detail. How they greeted me. How much time they spent talking to me, how genuinely interested they were in my stories. And the results were brutal. My older brother barely looked at me, always on his phone, giving one-word answers when I tried to talk. My sister only spoke to me when she wanted to complain about her life or needed information. My mom, that one hurt the most. She treated me with that condescending pity. You know, the kind of look people give a stray dog, like, poor thing, but what can you do? There was no pride, just pity. And pity, my friend, is not love. The most revealing moments were when they talked about money. My brother-in-law loved giving mini lectures about investments and how smart he was with finances. And there I was, sitting with a portfolio that would make him faint, just listening. Once he told me, in that patronizing tone, you should start thinking about your future, you know. It's never too late to learn about investing. I smiled and thanked him. Inside, I was calculating that my monthly passive income was higher than his annual salary. But I let him feel superior, because that false sense of superiority said a lot about his character. It showed he needed to feel above someone else just to validate his own existence. And I wasn't going to take that from him. Not yet. Then there was one episode that crystallized everything. It was a Sunday lunch, months before the disinvite. My cousin was sharing how she got promoted at work. Everyone clapping, cheering, celebrating like crazy. She was getting a $10,000 a year raise. And look, good for her. She worked hard. She deserved it. But the reaction was over the top. You'd think she'd cured cancer. During that same lunch, I casually mentioned I'd just closed a big contract. No details, no numbers, just in passing. You know what happened? Silence. Literally. 5 seconds of awkward silence until my aunt changed the subject. It was like I'd said it was raining outside. Irrelevant. Invisible. That moment made everything clear. Their success was celebrated. Mine was ignored. Not because mine was smaller, but because acknowledging my success would force them to confront their own biases. It would force them to admit they were wrong about me, that they'd underestimated me, that they'd been cruel for no reason. And proud people would rather keep you small than admit they were wrong. It's easier to ignore your victory than apologize for their humiliation. So they chose to ignore. And I, strategically, let them. Because every time they did, they showed me exactly who they were. And I needed to see that with complete clarity before making my move. Because revenge, without clarity, is just misdirected anger. I started documenting everything mentally. Not out of malice, but with precision. Every belittling comment, every exclusion, every moment I was treated like a second-class citizen. And you know what I discovered? The pattern was consistent. These weren't isolated incidents. It was a family culture. A toxic hierarchy where some people had value and others were disposable. And I was firmly in the disposable category. But here's the trick. When you stop seeking approval from people like that, when you stop giving them power over your self-worth, you see everything from a completely different angle. You stop feeling hurt. You start feeling curious, almost fascinated by the sick dynamic that used to consume you. I also kept my success hidden for another reason. Protection. I'd seen what happened when someone in the family suddenly came into money. They became a target. Everyone would show up with their hand out. Can you lend me, since you're in a good place? Family helps family, right? And it was never a request. It was guilt wrapped as obligation, as if one person's success meant everyone else deserved a cut. I didn't want that. I didn't want relatives knocking on my door with financial problems born from bad choices. I didn't want to be the family bank, so I stayed invisible, kept to myself, and it was the best decision I ever made. Because when you're open about what you have, people see you through the lens of envy or greed. But when you hide it, you stay human in their eyes, and you get to see how they treat you when they think you have nothing to offer. The test lasted 5 years. 5 years of silent observation. 5 years of awkward dinners, hearing jokes about my life, being excluded from important moments. And in every one of those moments, I had the power to flip the table, to reveal everything, to shut them down with facts and figures. But I didn't. Because I was playing a much longer game. I was building a solid foundation of evidence. And when the time came to walk away for good, I wanted to know it wasn't an emotional reaction. It was a strategic decision based on data. They gave me 5 years of data. And the data was undeniable. They didn't love me. They never did. And probably never would. And that truth, as painful as it was also incredibly freeing. So when I got that disinvite message, I wasn't surprised. I was relieved. Because they'd done the dirty work for me. They'd cut the tie. They'd given me the perfect excuse to never go back. And the best part? They thought they were punishing me. They thought they were excluding me, putting me in my place. But really, they were setting me free. They opened the cage. And I was about to fly. And when you fly, when you finally allow yourself to live without the weight of others' approval, that's when you understand what true revenge is. It's not making them suffer. It's living so well, so fully, that their absence in your life doesn't matter at all. And I was about to prove exactly that. Not to them, but to myself. The idea came to me in the middle of the night. I was on my porch, sipping tea, looking at the stars. You know those moments of absolute clarity when everything suddenly makes sense? It was one of those. I thought, if they don't want to make space for me at their table, I'll create a table where no one is left out. Not as an act of anger, not to prove a point, but as a genuine celebration of what really matters in life. A table built on gratitude, not obligation, on real affection, not hollow blood ties. And the more I thought about it, the more excited I got. Because for the first time in years, I was going to celebrate Thanksgiving the right way. My way. But it wouldn't be just any dinner. It would be unforgettable. The kind of experience people would carry with them for the rest of their lives. So I started planning every detail. First, the space. My dining room could comfortably fit 40 people. But I wanted something warmer, more intimate. I decided to use both the dining room and the covered outdoor area, blending the spaces together. I hired a decorator I knew and explained my vision. Elegant? Yes, but not flashy. I wanted people to feel special, not intimidated. I wanted comfort, not showmanship. She got it instantly. We got to work right away. 2 weeks, tight but doable. Then came the most important part. Who to invite. And honestly, It was both the easiest and hardest decision. Easy, because I knew exactly what kind of people I wanted there. Hard, because it meant admitting how many people around me lived with loneliness, exclusion, or hardship. I started making a mental list. My assistant, Sarah, was first, non-negotiable. A single mom of 3. She'd worked with me for 2 years, never complained, always smiling even when I knew things were tough at home. She'd mentioned casually that she'd be spending Thanksgiving alone with the kids because she had no family nearby. She'd be my first guest, along with her 3 little ones, of course. Then there was Mr. Robert, my neighbor, 78, widowed for 3 years, a retired literature professor. We often chat when we run into each other outside. He lends me books. I bring him baked goods when I try new recipes. Just last month, during one of those talks, he told me Thanksgiving was the hardest day of the year for him, the day he missed his wife the most. Said he'd stopped celebrating because eating alone on a day like that was too depressing. My heart broke right there, so I noted it mentally. Mr. Robert needs to be at my table. He deserves to laugh again, to feel human warmth, to know he still belongs somewhere. Because loneliness should never be the price of growing old. I also thought of the Syrian family I met through a charity I quietly sponsor. Refugees, they'd arrived in the U.S. just 8 months ago. The parents barely spoke English, but their eyes glowed with hope and gratitude for every little thing. They had 2 beautiful daughters, 8 and 12. It would be their first American Thanksgiving. Can you imagine the opportunity? To show this family, who started over from nothing, who lost everything, that America isn't just what they see on TV. It's also real people, opening real doors, building real memories. They had to be there. They needed to feel they'd chosen the right place to rebuild their lives. My list kept growing naturally. I added my company team, all 7 people who work directly with me. They're young, mostly between 25 and 32, incredible workers who believed in my vision when we were still just a tiny startup. Many of them were also spending the holiday far from family. One lives 2,000 miles away from his parents. Another hasn't spoken to hers in years after coming out and being rejected. One lost both parents in an accident and has no one left. These people built something with me. They sweated, cried, and celebrated every win by my side. If anyone deserved to celebrate with me, it was them. Not as employees, but as the family I consciously chose. I also thought of my old college friends from public university. You know the group my family always looked down on? Oh, the state school crowd. How cute. Yeah, that one. 6 of us stayed close over the years. And you know what we all had in common? We made it. One's a surgeon saving lives every day. Another's a human rights lawyer defending those without a voice. One became an award-winning chef. Another, a university professor shaping the next generation. They all built incredible careers through hard work, not fancy last names or inherited money. They knew what it was like to study by day and work by night. To eat ramen to save money for printing costs. That group would understand the real meaning of that table. They deserved to be there. I couldn't forget Mrs. Conchesson and her family. She's been my housekeeper for 3 years. But calling her just a housekeeper doesn't do her justice. She's wise, funny, works with pride, and raises 3 grandkids alone because her daughter's in prison. Never once complains. Always shows up singing, turning cleaning into dancing. One time she joked that she'd never been inside a real mansion as a guest. Only as staff. That she dreamed of sitting at one of those big tables she saw in movies. Well, her dream was about to come true. She'd come with her 3 grandkids, all under 10, and she'd sit at the head of the table, the place of honor, because humility and dignity always deserve the best seat. I also included a few teens from the social project I mentor. 5 of them, between 16 and 19. Some live in shelters. Others come from broken homes. One used to live on the streets. They're bright, talented, full of potential. Kids who just need opportunity and someone to believe in them. I believe in them. And I wanted them to see with their own eyes that the future can be different from the past. That there's room for everyone at the table, no matter where you come from. That revenge against a system built to hold you down is to rise, lift others with you, and celebrate every victory like it's an act of rebellion. Because it is. When I finished my list, I had 32 confirmed guests, 32 human beings who, in some way, had touched my life or been touched by it. None of them were there out of social obligation. Every name had a story, a genuine reason to be present. I looked at that list, and my eyes filled with tears, but not of sadness, of deep gratitude, because I realized that without even noticing, I had built a real family, one chosen carefully, person by person, moment by moment, and that family, even without shared blood, was more real, stronger, and more loving than any family tree could ever be. And I was about to bring them all together, in one place, for one night, to create a memory none of us would ever forget. Making the invitations was one of the most emotional experiences of my life, because it wasn't just about calling and saying, "Come have dinner here." It was about looking each person in the eye and saying, "You matter. You deserve to sit at a beautiful table. You deserve to be celebrated." And everyone's reaction was different, but they all had one thing in common: genuine surprise, as if no one had ever chosen them before, as if being included was some strange, almost unbelievable concept. And that broke my heart in the best possible way, because it made me realize how many people go through life waiting to be chosen, and never are, until someone comes along and simply says, "I choose you." When I called Sarah, my assistant, she was in the middle of a chaotic day. I could hear the kids yelling in the background, pots clattering, the beautiful kind of chaos that comes from a home full of life. "Sarah, do you have plans for Thanksgiving?" She hesitated. "Oh, I'll just do something simple with the kids." Simple, I later found out, meant frozen chicken nuggets and instant mashed potatoes. Not by choice, by necessity. Cancel that. You and the kids are coming to my house. Full dinner, real food. I want you here. Silence on the other end. Then she started crying. "You don't have to do that," she said between sobs. "I know I don't have to. I want to." And it was true. I genuinely wanted those 3 kids running through my house, laughing, being kids. I wanted Sarah to relax for one night. No cooking, no cleaning, just being. Mr. Robert was different. When I rang his doorbell with the invitation, he answered in his robe, glasses crooked, book in hand. He looked smaller than usual, frailer. "Robert, I'm hosting Thanksgiving at my house, and you have to be there." He gave a sad little smile. "Oh dear, that's very kind of you, but I don't want to be a burden." I cut him off immediately. "A burden? Robert, you're one of the most interesting people I know. You're going to sit at my table, tell us stories from your 50 years of teaching, make everyone laugh with your out-of-context Shakespeare quotes. You're coming, not as a favor, but because your presence makes everything better." He took off his glasses, wiped them on his robe, and when he put them back on, I saw his eyes shining. "Then I accept. With great pleasure." And for the first time in 3 years, he told me later, he had something to look forward to on Thanksgiving. The Syrian family was special. I went in person to the small house where they lived, in a modest neighborhood, but clean and full of hope. I knocked, and the father, Ahmad, opened the door with that cautious smile of someone still learning to trust again. I explained through his wife, Layla, who spoke better English. "I'd like to invite you to celebrate Thanksgiving with me. It's an important American tradition, and I'd love for you to experience it at my home," Layla translated. Ahmad looked confused. "But why? You don't even know us well." And there it was, the question that sums up the pain of a refugee. Why would anyone choose me? Because you're brave. Because you started over from nothing. Because your daughters deserve to see that this country has good people too. And because I want to," Layla cried. Ahmad clasped my hand in both of his. The girls jumped around with excitement, not fully understanding, but feeling that something good was happening. My company team reacted with noisy excitement. I called everyone into a meeting and dropped the news. "Guys, Thanksgiving at my house. You're all invited. Mandatory." Laughter. "Mandatory?" Jake, our developer, joked. "No, but it would be a personal insult if you didn't show up." More laughter. Then Amanda, our designer, got serious. "You know most of us are far from family, right?" "This means a lot." Everyone nodded. "Marcus, who hadn't spoken to his family in years, said quietly, "This'll be my first real Thanksgiving in 5 years." That caught me off guard. I knew their stories on the surface, but I hadn't realized how hollow the holiday could feel for them. How many people pretend holidays don't matter, because it hurts less than admitting they do. My team wasn't just my team. They were my trench family. My old college friends from public university reacted with that genuine excitement only old friendships have. I made a WhatsApp group called Thanksgiving at Rike's House. Attendance mandatory. The messages exploded. "Holy crap, you have a house now? Rike turned fancy and didn't tell us? Where exactly do you live?" I laughed out loud and sent the address. Silence. Then, "Wait, you live where? This is a joke, right? Did you win the lottery and forget to tell us?" I explained that life had gone well, without going into details. Their reaction was beautiful. No jealousy. Just real celebration. "I always knew you'd make it, you crazy woman. So deserved. Crying tears of pride here. That's the difference between people who love you and people who compete with you. Real love celebrates your win as if it were their own." And they were truly celebrating. Mrs. Conceição nearly fainted when I told her. Literally. She was cleaning the kitchen, humming a gospel song, when I asked to talk. "Mrs. Conceição, I have a special invitation." She froze, rag in hand, worried look. "Did I do something wrong?" "No, quite the opposite. I want you to come to my house for Thanksgiving, with your grandkids. As a guest." She blinked several times, processing. "As a guest?" "That's right. Sitting at the table, eating, talking, being treated like the incredible woman you are." Her legs gave out a little. I helped her sit. She held my hand and said, her voice trembling, "No one has ever, in 70 years of life, no one has ever invited me to sit at the real table." And she cried. She cried so much that I cried with her, and right there, in that kitchen, I understood the raw power of silent revenge. Not against Mrs. Conceição, of course, but against a system that teaches that some people serve and others are served. The teens from the social project were skeptical at first. Kids who've been let down too many times build this armor of distrust. "For real? Like you're not gonna cancel last minute?" asked Julia, 17, who's lived in 4 different shelters. "For real. And if I cancel, you have my permission to sue me." She laughed, but then got serious. "I've never been to a real Thanksgiving. Only seen it in movies. I always thought it was a rich people thing. It's not for rich people. It's for people who choose to be together. And I'm choosing you." Diego, 19, formerly homeless, looked me in the eye and asked, "Why? Why us?" And I answered honestly, "Because you remind me of who I was, and who I want to keep being. You keep me grounded." They didn't say anything else, but I saw in their eyes that the invitation meant more than dinner. It meant validation, belonging, hope. Every person I invited carried a story of exclusion, loneliness, or starting over. None of them were used to being a priority. They all lived on the margins, in the forgotten spaces, doing the best they could with what they had. And all of them, absolutely all of them, reacted with that mix of surprise and gratitude that only someone who's been invisible their whole life knows. When I finished sending the invitations, I sat on the couch and took a deep breath. 32 confirmed guests. 32 souls who deserved to be celebrated. And none of them shared my DNA. None of them were there out of obligation. They were there because I wanted them to be. And they wanted to be. And that, I discovered, is the foundation of every true family. Not blood, choice. Not duty, genuine desire to be together. And this table I was building would be living proof that family isn't born. It's built. I looked at the calendar. 12 days left. 12 days to organize what would, without exaggeration, be the most important Thanksgiving of my life. Not because it would be fancy or expensive, but because it would be real. Because everyone at that table would have a true reason to be there. And when you bring together 32 people with real stories, real pain, real victories, something magical happens. It's not just dinner. It's communion. It's mutual recognition. It's saying, without words, "I see you. I respect you. I celebrate you. And I was about to create that space. Not as revenge against my blood family, but as a celebration of everything they never understood. That human worth isn't measured by bank accounts, last names, or zip codes. It's measured in character, kindness, and the ability to rise and lift others with you. And the 32 people on my list had that in abundance. I woke up at 5 a.m. on Thanksgiving Day. Not from anxiety, just pure excitement. That childlike feeling you get on Christmas morning, you know. I went to the window and saw the sun starting to rise, painting the sky orange and pink. The house was still silent, but I knew that in just a few hours it would be full of life, laughter, and stories. I went downstairs barefoot to the kitchen and found the chef and his team already working. The smell of spices, roasting turkey, and pies coming out of the oven filled my senses. "Good morning, everyone." "Coffee?" They all accepted. We sat around the kitchen island, drinking coffee together, and I realized even that moment was special, because we weren't boss and employees. We were a group of people creating something beautiful together, and that kind of collaboration carries an energy no amount of money can buy. The decorator arrived at 7 with her team. I had asked for something elegant but welcoming. She went above and beyond. She used earthy tones, soft golds, and arrangements of autumn leaves mixed with white flowers. Candles everywhere, but nothing over the top. Everything radiated warmth. The main table had 40 seats, with personalized placemats, each featuring the guest's name in delicate calligraphy. But the detail that moved me the most was the centerpiece. A circular arrangement where each flower represented one guest. Each flower has a story, just like each of your guests, she explained. I gently touched the petals, and my eyes welled up. It wasn't about showing off. It was art. It was love turned into aesthetics. It was respect for every soul that would walk through that door. Around 9, I started getting ready. I picked a simple, elegant dress. Nothing intimidating. I didn't want anyone to feel out of place. I wanted people to see me as a host, not a spectacle. Light makeup, loose hair, genuine smile. I looked in the mirror, and for the first time in a long time, I liked what I saw. Not because of appearance, but because of what that reflection represented. A woman who built something from scratch, who survived rejection, who turned pain into purpose, who was about to use her success not to isolate herself in luxury, but to connect people. And that version of me, I loved her deeply. She was who I had always wanted to be. It had just taken a painful journey to get there. The first to arrive were Sarah and her kids. The doorbell rang at 2 p.m. I opened the door and the 3 little ones burst in with energy. "Wow, look at this place!" shouted the oldest, about 8. Sarah looked nervous, holding a slightly crooked homemade pie. "I know you already have plenty of food, but I couldn't come empty-handed." I took the pie reverently. "This one will have a place of honor on the dessert table. Made with love always beats made with skill." She smiled, relaxing a bit. The kids had already run into the living room, eyes wide with wonder. "Can they touch things?" Sarah asked, worried. "They can. They can explore, play, live. That's what a home is for. Watching those kids run freely, laughing without the fear of breaking something expensive. That was one of the most beautiful moments of the day, because kids need that. They need space to be kids without adult anxiety. Mr. Roberto arrived soon after, in a full suit, tie, polished shoes, the whole thing. He had dressed like it was a state occasion. "Roberto, you look so handsome." He adjusted his tie shyly. "I haven't worn this in 3 years, since Martha's funeral. But today felt right. Today is special." I offered my arm, and he took it. We walked to the dining room together. When he saw the table, he stopped. Just stood there, taking it in. "You okay?" I asked softly. He nodded slowly. "It's perfect. It's exactly how Martha used to decorate. With soul, not money." And in that simple comment, I knew I had gotten it right. Because it wasn't about impressing, it was about welcoming. And real warmth touches the soul in a way empty luxury never can. That 78-year-old man was being touched deeply. The Syrian family arrived together, the girls in new dresses, the parents visibly nervous but smiling. Sarah's kids were already playing in the yard, and after a moment of shyness, the Syrian girls joined them. Within 5 minutes, they were running together, laughing, inventing games in a mix of broken English and the universal language of childhood. Ahmad squeezed my hand tightly. "Thank you. Thank you very much." Those were the only words he knew in English, but the emotion in his voice needed no translation. Layla, eyes shining, said, "When we fled the war, I thought we'd never have a moment of pure joy again. But look at my daughters. Look how happy they are." And we stood there, 2 women from completely different worlds, watching children play, sharing a silent moment of gratitude that transcended every cultural barrier. One by one, everyone arrived. My team from work came together, loud before they even stepped inside. "Boss, this place is insane!" Jake couldn't close his mouth. Amanda was filming everything, probably to show her parents. Marcus stayed quiet, but I saw him discreetly wipe his eyes. My old college friends showed up with wine and even more noise. "Richie, are you rich, or just rich?" Carol teased. "Rich enough to throw this dinner. Poor enough to still remember where I came from." Laughter. Hugs. That kind of bond only old friendship carries. Mrs. Conciso arrived last with her 3 grandkids, all dressed in their Sunday best, clearly the nicest clothes they had. She looked around the house, the table, at me, and simply said, "Jesus." It was the most sincere prayer I heard that day. Once everyone had arrived, I asked for silence. 32 people stopped talking and looked at me. 32 pairs of eyes, each carrying a story, a journey, a reason to be there. I took a deep breath. I could give a long speech about gratitude and tradition, but I'll keep it short. You're not here by accident. You're not here because we share blood. You're here because in some way, you've touched my life. Or I've touched yours. You're here because in a world that keeps dividing people between who deserves and who doesn't, I chose to build a table where everyone deserves. Where a refugee child sits next to a business owner. Where a widower sits next to an at-risk teenager. Where a single mom sits next to a retired teacher. Because human worth has no hierarchy. I paused, feeling the emotion rise. Family isn't who shares your last name. It's who shares their table with you when you have nothing to offer but yourself. It's who chooses you. Not out of obligation, but out of desire. It's who looks at you and sees value where others see invisibility. All of you, at some point, saw me when others didn't. So today, I see you. I celebrate you. And I thank you for being here. Tears started streaming freely now. My life has changed a lot over the years, but one thing hasn't. My belief that true success isn't measured by what you accumulate. It's measured by what you share. And today, I share all of this with you. Not as charity, but as a privilege. The privilege of being surrounded by real people, with real stories and real hearts. I raised my glass. 32 people raised theirs too. So my toast is simple. To the family we choose, to the people who choose us back, and to the most powerful kind of revenge there is, living so well, so fully, so generously, that the absence of those who rejected us becomes completely irrelevant. The clinking of glasses echoed. But before anyone could drink, Mr. Roberto raised his hand. "May I add something?" Everyone nodded. He stood, with the grace of someone who had spent his life teaching young minds to think. In 50 years as a professor, I taught thousands of students about literature, history, the world. But today, this young woman taught me the most important lesson of all, that home isn't where you're born, it's where you're chosen. Thank you for choosing me, dear. You've given me back something I thought I'd lost forever. Hope. There wasn't a dry eye in the room. And dinner hadn't even started yet. Dinner lasted for hours. Hours of overlapping conversations. Laughter echoing through the walls. Stories being shared. Connections forming. I moved around, making sure everyone was comfortable, but mostly just watching the magic unfold. I saw Mr. Roberto telling Shakespeare stories to the teens from the mentorship program, who listened, mesmerized. I saw Mrs. Conceição chatting with Layla about recipes, using more gestures than words, yet understanding each other perfectly. I saw kids from 3 different families playing together, as if they'd been cousins all their lives. And there, in that room full of people who theoretically had nothing in common, I saw something my blood family never managed to create. Genuine harmony. Because when you bring people together by heart, not by last name, the connection is natural, not forced. Around 8 that evening, Amanda suggested taking a photo. "Boss, this is historic. We've got to document it." I hesitated for a second. Not because of the photo itself, but because of what it represented. Because I knew if I posted it, my family would see it. And part of me still had that old reflex to stay small, invisible, unprovocative. But then I looked around. I looked at those 32 people who had opened their hearts and their holiday to be there with me. They deserved to be celebrated. Publicly. Without shame. Without fear. So I agreed. Let's take one. But no fake poses. I want something real. We set up the phone timer. Everyone crowded around the table, and the photo captured exactly what I wanted. Genuine smiles, awkward hugs, kids making silly faces, people being authentically happy. I went to Instagram, chose the picture, and wrote a simple caption. Nothing provocative, nothing bitter, just grateful to celebrate with my chosen family. 32 hearts at my table. I hit post and put my phone aside. I wasn't going to check reactions. I wasn't going to let the digital world pollute the real one unfolding in my living room. I went back to dinner, back into the laughter and conversations, leaving my phone forgotten in the kitchen. But the internet has a life of its own, doesn't it? And when you light a fuse, even unintentionally, the fire spreads on its own. And this fire was about to burn a few bridges I had already decided to cross for the last time anyway. 2 hours later, when I went to the kitchen for some water, my phone was lit up like a Christmas tree. 57 notifications. In 2 hours. I picked it up, curious. The first message was from my cousin, the one who'd made that poll about how many people were going to their intimate Thanksgiving. "OMG, what a gorgeous house. I didn't know you'd moved. Where is that?" I didn't answer. Scrolled down. My sister, 20 minutes after I posted. "Wow, is that your house? You didn't tell me you bought a mansion. We need to talk. Call me." That tone. Fake concern wrapped in entitlement. Classic. Ignored. More messages. Aunts, distant cousins, even people who hadn't spoken to me in years. All suddenly so interested in my life. Funny how visible success works like a magnet for people who ignored you when you were invisible. The one that stood out most was from my mom. It came an hour after the post. "Sweetheart, what a beautiful place. Can I call you? I think we should catch up. It's been a while since we really talked." Been a while? We'd literally spoken the week before, when she called about my sister's disinvite and didn't lift a finger to defend me. But now, after seeing the house, realizing I had a life she knew nothing about, now she wanted to catch up. It wasn't about seeing me. It was about gathering intel, about understanding how she'd lost track of me, about realizing she no longer had control. I read the message 3 times, marked it as read, didn't reply, went back to the dinner as if nothing had happened, because honestly, nothing had, just empty words arriving too late. What I didn't know then was that over at my sister's house, where 23 people were celebrating their intimate Thanksgiving, my post had caused an earthquake. I found out later through a mutual friend who'd been there. Apparently, my cousin had shown the photo to everyone. "Guys, look where our cousin lives." And then the circus began. Everyone passed the phone around, zooming in, trying to guess the location from the decor, mentally calculating how much everything must have cost. My sister, according to my friend, looked visibly bothered. She grabbed her own phone, stalked my profile, and realized I hadn't posted anything personal in years. Nothing about work, money, or my home. I was a digital ghost. And that photo was the first concrete proof that my life was completely different from what she'd imagined. The family WhatsApp group, the one I'd muted months ago, blew up. 143 messages in 3 hours. Curiosity got the best of me, so I peeked, just to watch. It was fascinating. Does anyone know where she lives? What house is that? Did she marry someone rich and not tell us? Since when does she have that kind of money? Why didn't she ever mention anything? The theories were hilarious. Some thought I'd gotten married. Others thought I'd inherited something. The most creative ones guessed I'd rented the place just for the picture. Not a single person, not one, considered the obvious, that I'd built everything myself through hard work, because in their minds, I wasn't capable of that. I was the failure, remember? There was no way I could have achieved real success. It had to be luck, marriage, or a lie. Never merit. My aunt, always the blunt one, finally wrote in the chat, "I think we have to admit it. We don't know anything about her life." And that message created a moment of silence. Because it was true. They didn't know. Not because I'd been hiding anything, but because they'd never genuinely asked. Never showed real interest. They'd always assumed my life was small, predictable, mediocre. And when you make assumptions about someone without ever checking in, when you mentally box them up and lock it, you lose all sense of who they actually are. They'd locked me in that failure box for so long they couldn't even process evidence to the contrary. It was too cognitively dissonant. So they preferred wild theories over admitting they'd been wrong about me all along. The private messages kept coming through the night, each more desperate, more transparent. My sister sent 4 in a row. "Please call me. I don't understand why you're ignoring me. Did I do something wrong? I just want to know how you're doing." How I'm doing. Now she wants to know how I'm doing? After uninviting me from Thanksgiving? After years of treating me like I was beneath her? Now that she's seen a nice house in a photo? Suddenly she's interested in my life? The transparency was almost offensive, but it was also freeing, because it confirmed what I'd always known. Their interest was never in me. It was in what I had. And once you see that with absolute clarity, once you understand that some people only value you for what they can extract, you start making decisions from power, not from pain. And my decision had been made days ago. Not replying was the reply. Around midnight, when the last guests were leaving, each with a to-go box I insisted they take, each with long hugs and promises to see each other again, I checked my phone one last time. 212 notifications. Messages, comments, tags. My whole family scrambling to reach someone who had been available for years, but whom they chose to ignore. And now that I was unavailable, now that I'd built healthy boundaries, suddenly they wanted attention. Funny how that works. Ignorance only turns into curiosity when paired with visible success. And revenge, the real kind, doesn't need words. It only needs silence. Eloquent silence that says, "You had your chance. You wasted it. Now live with the consequences." Not out of anger, but out of indifference. And indifference, I realized that night, hurts them far more than any confrontation ever could. In the days following Thanksgiving, the messages didn't stop. If anything, they intensified. My family had entered controlled panic mode. That kind of panic disguised as concern. "Daughter, are you okay?" "I'm worried about you," my mom wrote on the 3rd day. Worried. The word echoed in my head with sharp irony. She wasn't worried when they uninvited me. She wasn't worried over the last 5 years while I was building my life alone. But now that there was photographic evidence that I wasn't who she thought I was, suddenly, the worry appeared. Curiosity disguised as motherly affection. I read the message, felt absolutely nothing, and archived it. No anger, no resentment, just a cold neutrality that surprised me with its own temperature. What no one expected was my strategy, because strategy was exactly what it was. I'll be honest with you. I could have caused a scene. I could have posted screenshots of the uninvite message. I could have written a long, emotional post exposing every humiliation, every cruel comment, every moment I'd been treated like a second-class citizen. The internet loves a well-documented family drama. I would have gone viral. I would have gotten validation from thousands of strangers. I would have watched my family be publicly crucified. And part of me, the wounded part that still bled sometimes, wanted exactly that. wanted them to feel shame, wanted them to hurt, wanted revenge mean in the most primitive sense of the word. But then I remembered something Mr. Roberto told me years ago, quoting some philosopher. Living well is the best revenge. So I chose something infinitely more powerful. Indifference. Not performative indifference, where you pretend you don't care, but keep checking your phone obsessively. Real indifference. The kind that's born when you genuinely no longer need that person in your life, when their presence or absence stops affecting your peace. I didn't block anyone. I didn't delete anyone. I just stopped responding, stopped giving energy, stopped feeding a relationship that had always been one-sided. And I discovered something fascinating. Strategic silence drives people crazy in ways words never could, because words give them something to argue with, to justify, to twist. Silence forces them to confront their own behavior, without crutches, excuses, or distractions. A week after Thanksgiving, my sister showed up at my house, unannounced. She just rang the doorbell at 10 on a Saturday morning. I was working in my office when it rang. I checked the security camera, and there she was, alone, visibly nervous. My first instinct was not to answer, but curiosity won. I wanted to see how far she'd go. I opened the door. "Hi." That's all I said. She stood there, staring at the house, processing, trying to reconcile the mental image she had of me with the physical reality in front of her. You really live here?" "Yes." An awkward pause. "How long?" 2 years. I saw the shock on her face. 2 years. 2 years of family dinners where I pretended to live in a simple apartment. 2 years of lies by omission. Or, from my perspective, 2 years of a test she failed miserably. She tried to step inside, but I gently blocked her way. "Now's not a good time. I just wanted to talk, to understand all this." She gestured vaguely as if this explained the entire universe. "Understand what, exactly?" My voice was calm, almost polite. It disarmed her. She was expecting anger, tears, confrontation. Not this composed coldness. Why you never told anyone." Ah, there it was. The real question. Not, "How are you?" Not, "I'm sorry for excluding you." Not, "I was wrong, but why did you hide information from me?" Because for her, the problem wasn't how she treated me. It was losing access to privileged information. It was about control. It always had been. I took a deep breath. I had 2 options. I could unload years of bottled-up hurt. I could yell, cry, demand explanations and apologies. Or I could do what I'd promised myself. Keep my dignity. I never hid anything. You just never asked in a real way. And when you did, it was always with so much disdain, so much certainty that I was a failure, that it wasn't worth correcting you. I let you believe what you wanted. She shook her head. "That's not fair. We're family." And there it was. The family card. The one toxic people always play when they lose control. Family, I replied calmly, isn't just DNA. It's how you treat people. And you all treated me as disposable. So I'm comfortable discarding you too. Not out of anger, just indifference. I saw the impact of that word on her face. Indifference. Not hate. Not pain. Indifference. It's worse, isn't it? Because hate is still emotional connection. It means the person still matters enough to provoke strong feelings. Indifference is the complete death of a relationship. The emotional death certificate. You can't just cut me off like that. I'm your sister. Biologically, yes. Emotionally, you stopped being my sister the moment you uninvited me from that dinner. Not for the act itself, but for the lack of remorse. You didn't come here to apologize. You came to understand how you lost access to my life. And that says it all. She tried to argue, but I raised my hand. I'm not going to argue. I'm not going to fight. I'm just going to live my life, and this life has no room for toxic dynamics. I truly wish you happiness. Just far from me. I closed the door. Gently. No slamming. Because loud revenge gives momentary satisfaction. But silent revenge, the kind that closes doors softly and never opens them again, that brings permanent peace. I leaned against the door for a moment, breathing, waiting to feel guilt or doubt. But nothing came, just relief. Immense relief. Like someone had lifted a 50-pound backpack off my shoulders. I went to the window and saw her getting into her car, confused, probably processing that she'd just been rejected the same way she once rejected me. Only this time, I did it with class. No public humiliation, no drama. Just a clear boundary, held firmly. And healthy boundaries, I realized, are the most mature form of revenge that exists. My mom tried a different approach. She called insistently until I answered, "We need to talk in person." "No, Mom, we don't." "You're being childish. Is this about that Thanksgiving?" It was just a misunderstanding. Misunderstanding. Funny how abusers always redefine abuse as a misunderstanding when confronted. It wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a choice. You chose to exclude me. I choose to exclude myself from you, permanently. Stunned silence on the other end. "You can't be serious." "I'm completely serious. You had decades to treat me well. You chose not to. Now live with the consequences." "But we're your family." Again with the family card. "No, Mom. Family is who loves you when you have nothing to offer. Family defends you when you're attacked. Family is presence, loyalty, genuine affection. You're just people I share genes with. And that's not enough anymore." I hung up, blocked the number, did the same with everyone else. One by one, systematically, I cut every line of communication. Not with anger, but with surgical precision. Some might call it cruel, but you know what's truly cruel? Spending years surviving on crumbs of affection, begging for approval that never comes, shrinking yourself to fit into a space that was never meant for you. That's cruel. Setting boundaries, protecting your peace, choosing your own mental health, that's survival. That's self-love. And self-love, I learned the hard way, sometimes requires closing doors on people who share your last name. Not because you're cruel, but because you finally understand you deserve better. 2 weeks later, I got a letter. A physical one, in the mail. It was from my mother. Long, full of justifications, apologies that weren't really apologies, attempts to minimize years of emotional neglect. I read it once, felt nothing. No anger, no sadness, no relief. Absolutely nothing. And that's when I knew I'd truly healed. Because when the words of the people who hurt you no longer provoke any emotional reaction, that's when healing has happened. I put the letter in a drawer. Didn't reply. Because some conversations don't deserve to be continued. And some relationships don't deserve to be saved. And having the wisdom to tell what can be fixed from what should be left behind, that, my friend, is the final revenge. The revenge of living so completely at peace that the past becomes just a distant story you tell sometimes, without pain, without weight, without any power over your present. 6 months have passed since that Thanksgiving. 6 months of absolute silence between me and my blood family. And you know what changed in my life? Nothing. Absolutely nothing bad. In fact, everything got better. My business grew 30%. My mental health has never been so stable. I wake up every day without that weight on my chest, without that constant anxiety of not being good enough, and I realize something deep. I didn't miss them. Not really. What I missed was the idea of them, the fantasy of having a family that loved me, but the reality was toxic, destructive, harmful. And when you finally see that clearly, when you stop fighting against the truth, that's when you can start building something real, something based on choice, not obligation. And that's the first lesson I want to share. True family isn't born, it's built. The 32 people from that Thanksgiving, they became a permanent part of my life. We created a WhatsApp group called Chosen Family. We have monthly dinners at my house, taking turns cooking. Mr. Roberto became the honorary grandpa to all the kids. Mrs. Conceição teaches me her grandmother's recipes while I help the grandkids with homework. Sarah became my partner in a new project. The young people from the community program all have jobs or are studying because we built a real support network. The Syrian family opened a small restaurant with an investment I made, and now they're thriving. And all this happened because I stopped wasting energy on people who didn't deserve it and redirected it to those who did. That's the second lesson. Your energy is finite. Spend it wisely. Because every minute wasted on toxic people is a minute stolen from those who truly love you. There was a moment a few months ago that crystallized everything. I was at one of those monthly dinners. Everyone talking, laughing, kids running around. And Mr. Roberto said something that stuck with me. You know what the difference is between this table and most family tables? Here, no one's here out of obligation. Everyone wants to be here, and you can feel it, in the energy, in the lightness, in the authenticity. He was right. There was no forced tension, no one pretending to like each other, no toxic hierarchies or constant comparisons, just genuine connection. And compared to the Thanksgivings with my biological family, where every gathering was an emotional minefield, the difference was night and day. That's the third lesson. The quality of relationships matters infinitely more than quantity or tradition. Better 10 people who truly love you than 50 who just tolerate you out of social obligation. Let me be honest about something no one talks about. Cutting off family hurts. Even when it's the right decision, even when it's necessary for your emotional survival, it hurts. Because we grow up hearing that family is sacred, that blood is thicker than water, that you must always forgive. And when you go against that cultural programming, when you say, no, I don't need to keep toxic people in my life just because we share DNA, you face guilt. A lot of guilt. In the first few months, there were days I wondered if I was being too cruel, if I should give them another chance, if I was throwing away something that could be fixed. But then, I remembered. I remembered every nasty comment, every deliberate exclusion, every time I was treated as less, and the guilt passed, because I wasn't abandoning them. They had abandoned me long before. I was just making it official. The revenge I built wasn't against them. It was for myself. That's important to understand. True revenge isn't destructive. It's constructive. It's not about tearing someone down. It's about rising so high that they become irrelevant to your story. My family expected me to beg to come back, to humiliate myself, to accept scraps. And when I didn't, when I just kept living my beautiful life without them, it completely threw them off. Because controlling people don't know how to handle indifference. They understand anger, they understand hurt, even condescending forgiveness. But genuine indifference? That breaks their script. And that script break is the most powerful revenge possible. Not because it hurts them, but because it frees you. And freedom, I discovered, is worth more than any external validation ever could be. One of the most liberating things was realizing I didn't need their narrative anymore. For years, I let them define who I was. The failure, the black sheep, the disappointment. And even when I proved them wrong, even when I built undeniable success, part of me still carried those labels inside. But when I cut contact, when I stopped giving them power over my self-image, those labels started falling off, one by one. And now I see myself through the eyes of people who truly know and love me. And in those eyes, I'm incredible. I'm generous. I'm strong. I'm inspiring. Not perfect, of course, but deeply valuable. That's the fifth lesson. You don't need the approval of those who hurt you. You need your own approval, and the approval of those who truly see you. The rest is noise. I also learned that there's a kind of loneliness far worse than being physically alone. It's being surrounded by people and feeling completely invisible. I lived that for decades at family gatherings. A full room, but emotionally isolated. Speaking without being heard. Existing without being seen. And they called that family. But after that Thanksgiving, after building my chosen family, I finally understood what belonging really is. It's when you walk into a room and people light up, when your stories matter, when your victories are celebrated and your pain is met with compassion, when you can be authentically yourself without fear of judgment. That's real belonging. And it has nothing to do with your last name. It has to do with mutual choice, mutual respect, and love shown through actions, not empty words. Sixth lesson: true belonging isn't where you're born, it's where you bloom. If I could go back in time and talk to that 20-year-old girl, so insecure, begging for her family's approval, you know what I'd say? Stop fighting for people who don't value you. Redirect that energy into building something that's yours. And when you win, and you will win, don't go back to prove anything to them. Move forward with the ones who truly matter. Because that's the mistake so many of us make. Myself included for a long time. We build success just to rub it in the faces of those who doubted us. But when you finally get there, when you finally win, you realize their opinion doesn't matter anymore. What matters is the peace you feel waking up every day, without carrying the weight of their rejection. What matters is the genuine joy of being surrounded by people who chose you. What matters is looking in the mirror and loving who you see. That, my friend, is complete revenge. It doesn't need confrontation. It doesn't need exposure. It just needs you living so well that their absence becomes an irrelevant detail. Today, when I think about them, I feel nothing. No love, no hate, no hurt. It's like thinking about characters from a book I read a long time ago. I recognize they existed, that they were part of my story, but they have no power over my present or my future. And that emotional neutrality? That was the hardest and most valuable achievement of my life, because it means I truly healed. I didn't fake healing while still carrying resentment. I healed for real. Did I forgive? Maybe. But not in the way society romanticizes it. It wasn't a reconciliatory hug and let's forget the past. It was more like, I accept that you are who you are. I accept that you'll never change. And I choose not to let that affect my life anymore. You go your way, and I'll go mine. And those paths no longer cross. That kind of forgiveness without reconciliation is possible. And sometimes, it's the only healthy kind. The last lesson, and maybe the most important one. Silent revenge isn't about the other person. It's about you. It's about reclaiming your power, your story, your peace. It's about building a life so beautiful, so full of purpose and real connections, that what the wrong people think becomes completely irrelevant. It's about waking up every day knowing you're worth more than the way you were treated. It's about using pain as fuel, not to destroy those who hurt you, but to build something so beautiful that its very existence proves they were wrong about you. My mansion isn't revenge. My money isn't revenge. But my peace, my genuine joy, my chosen family, my ability to love and be deeply loved, that, all of that, is the most complete revenge I could ever have, because they bet I would fail. And not only did I win, I thrived. And I did it without them. And that emotional and material independence, that total self-sufficiency, is the ultimate freedom. And freedom, I discovered, is priceless.